Now, the Iowa caucuses are nothing like the way we vote in Arizona. It's a bunch of people gathering in a room and telling each other which candidate they support. Then it kind of turns into a game of Red Rover with some complicated rules. So here's how the Iowa caucuses really work.
Tails. We got the extra delegate.
All it took was the flip of a coin.
Our official delegate for this precinct is Hillary Clinton.
To break Hillary Clinton's tie with Bernie Sanders.
Remember, this is a caucus. It was very, very close. It was called by a coin toss.
And show us all just how quirky the Iowa caucuses can be. The first in the nation vote is unlike almost any other. The rooms where it happens are 1,700 local precincts across Iowa, in school gyms, church basements, public libraries, even homes. Caucus goers will meet there at 7 p.m. Monday. How do they vote? There are no secret ballots to fill out or voting machines to hack. It's all public. Caucus participants write their candidate's name on a card and gather in groups that support the same candidate. But it's not that simple. In caucus lingo, the groups are called alignments. If the people in your alignment don't equal at least 15% of the caucus goers in your precinct, your group's candidate is declared non-viable. You'll be the target of fierce lobbying to join viable candidates or unite with other non-viable candidates in a second round realignment. So what are they voting for? This isn't one person, one vote. In fact, caucus participants aren't really voting. The caucus candidate selections are the first step on a long path to award Iowa delegates to the Democratic National Convention. Delegates pick the presidential nominee.
So the caucuses can give the rest of the country an indication of who it is that knowledgeable and interested party activists think should be the party's choice for the nomination.
Drake University professor Dennis Goldford, an expert on Iowa caucuses, explained what it all means.
What the rest of the country does with that information is up to the rest of the country.